At the same token, one of the things that we learn in the Mishnah in Masechet Avot is that one of the things that we see among the sages is that they're not shy about calling things out and telling people when they're wrong. There's an obligation to rebuke, but not just rebuke for the sake of rebuking for the sake of helping people. And if a person cares about another Jew, cares about another person, then certainly if he sees that person doing something wrong, he's going to show that care, not by yelling and screaming at them, not by insulting them, but rather by actually telling them that they're doing something wrong. But sometimes you can tell somebody something, and the mental capacity that that person has is so limited that instead of seeing your words as helpful, they'll actually see it as insulting. One of the examples is what this whole shiur is about, which is lowlives. How to avoid being a lowlife is clearly something all of us want to do, but at the same token, how do we help lowlives? Now, if you look at the definition of a lowlife on a dictionary, you'll see that a lowlife is somebody that is unacceptable in society because of his immoral behavior. Somebody that simply is not doesn't behave in a nice way. Now, of course, they also categorize a lowlife, and most of you, if you see, there's a lecture by a rabbi helping lowlives, or how to avoid being a lowlife, this rabbi is too harsh, this is not nice, that's not the way to talk, but that's simply because you're not aware of the definition of lowlife. You're assuming that the definition by Wikipedia or by some Oxford dictionary is the definition for a lowlife, because they categorize a lowlife as someone that's, by definition, a criminal, someone that is hurting others with his criminal behavior. Now, although that is correct, that's not the only definition of lowlife. The original foundation of lowlife is someone that has a low self-respect or no self-respect to the point where they're doing things that are simply despicable. There was a question that came up in the lecture last week, in the shiur last week, Stump the Rabbi, where someone shocked even me with the question that I kind of skipped the word that he used just simply because it was bothersome to me, I guess, where he has a guest that has been coming to his house for Shabbat for many years, and this guest apparently is a lowlife, and although they may not see him as a lowlife, they certainly see him as a family member. He acts like a lowlife. How so? He feels so comfortable with the surroundings, despite the fact that it's Shulchan Shabbat, it's the Shabbat dinner, it's holy. When you're eating on a Shulchan Shabbat, or you're eating bread in general, it's the equivalent in Judaism to the Mizbeach, to the altar, as if you're offering a sacrifice to God. So of course a person has to behave in a certain manners, certain good manners. But this lowlife feels so comfortable and so at home with his surroundings that he has no problem flatulating and relieving himself of all types of gases from his body during the actual dinner, meaning loud enough for people to hear, close enough for people to smell, and in so many words, disgusting. Now, this type of disgusting behavior is very much indeed a perfect definition of the actions of a lowlife. Not just because of what he did, because certainly these are things that many people do. You have to do it at times, but typically a normal person would do these things in private, in a bathroom, in a place where you're not going to hurt or anybody else or affect anyone else, and certainly not show lack of respect for the honor of Shabbat, for holiness, or for even for other people, or for yourself. This type of behavior is unfortunately common among lowlives that have lost any realm of self-respect. They simply do not see anything wrong with behaving in such a manner because they excuse it, either because they have a stomach ache or because what's the big deal? Why are you so extreme? Why are you so stringent? And even if you try to help these lowlives, it's almost like a dead end because they don't even understand what's wrong with what they did. Typically, when you're dealing with a child, if the child is smart, now you may have to explain yourself a few times, but typically the best way to explain to a child that they did something wrong, if they don't understand right away, is simply giving them the example of what if I did this to you. So if, let's say, for example, one child, insulted their brother or sister, and they said, "Oh, you are, you're stupid." Now, obviously, that's not very nice, and the other kid starts crying, and he goes to his mommy and daddy and said, "Oh, look, my brother called me stupid," and the first child says, "Oh, what's the big deal? It's just a word." So, of course, if the parents want to help the kid, instead of yelling at the kid, what are they going to do? They're going to go put the kid to the side and talk to him and say, "Listen, why did you say it?" "Well, what's the big deal? It's just a word." "Okay. Well, what if I said that you are stupid?" I'm like, "Well, I don't care. You can do it all the time." So, okay, so they don't get it. He says, "Okay, what if I went to school in front of all your friends in school? I said, hey, by the way, this is my son or daughter. They're stupid. What do you guys think?" Oh, all of a sudden the kid's face changes. Why does it change? Because all of a sudden they're starting to put things into perspective, and they realize, oh, maybe I don't want to be called stupid, especially not in front of people. It's be embarrassed. Everybody's going to call me names then. They're going to think I'm this, they're going to think I'm that. So when you're speaking to a child, even though you will sometimes have to explain yourself in multiple ways, and you have to have an endless amount of patience if you want to be a good parent, with adults, it's not really that different. But sometimes it requires even more patience, because that adult has been doing the wrong thing for so long, they've actually gotten to the point where they believe it's right. The kid just doesn't understand necessarily the difference between right and wrong yet. He's brand new. He's like a, clean piece of paper, white, there's nothing on it. The older person that's already in his 30s, 40s, 50 years old, 60 years old, he has been doing the wrong thing for so long, he has turned what he thinks is wrong, what is wrong, into what's right, and literally has become a lowlife. So in our work, one of the things that we have to constantly deal with is the people out there that don't realize that they're lowlives because they don't have Torah in their life. So for them, what they're comparing themselves to are other people that are just like them. Other people that, use foul language, cuss and mock people and make fun of people and yell at people. And, if they go to a hotel and their room is not ready on time, or if they go to a restaurant and the food is not ready, or they served them the wrong meal, they feel perfectly comfortable yelling at the waitress or at the waiter and yelling at the people, and they think that's a show of confidence. The reality is that if you're learning your midot, your character traits from television, from all the filth that's in movies and things like that, then yeah, you'll think that's right. But if you learn from a Torah, quickly you'll find out that these types of behaviors are the behavior of a lowlife. So one of the things that each and every single one of us has to do as part of our own tshuva transformation is to remove ourselves as far away from the lowlife behavior that we've become accustomed to, and to become a righteous person. But the first thing is to not be busy with being offended by the term, and more be busier with actually making sure we don't fit the definition of the sages. So in so many words, a lowlife is not necessarily always going to be a criminal, but certainly is going to be someone that has lost self-respect. So the sages discuss this extensively. We're going to go into several different sources. But first, we're going to start off with our basic foundation, which is the Chazon Ish. Last week, the Chazon Ish told us that it's an obligation for all educators to study every individual student, to see the roots of their personality, to make sure that whatever teachings they're giving them, which is in essence the spiritual medicine that they're giving them, is helping them. Because if it's not helping them, it could actually be harming them. And it's critical for the teacher to make sure that their students are paying attention. Unfortunately, there are times where the student is simply not paying attention. He doesn't come to class anymore. A person like that you can't help. This is why I always tell people that when they ask me to call whatever relative they want me to call or friend they want me to call to help them come back to the right way of Hashem, I tell them, before I call, before I talk, before I do anything, they have to watch several lectures. And the reason why is because I want to know, first and foremost, Are they looking to help themselves? Are they willing to help themselves? Or are they so confident in their wrong path that they're completely closed to any type of resourcefulness, any type of help? If they're not even interested in any type of education, there's nothing you can do to help such a person. So it's critical for the teacher to be helpful and to be conscious of what the students are learning, but it's even more critical for the student to be receptive. Now in this section, Chazon Ish says the following: Kiyat ha'or ha'nafshi kera'ua shiflut ha'nefesh. The darkening or feebleness of the spiritual light is called baseness or lowliness of the spirit. Such lowliness is like a closed door which prevents the entrance of morality. One cannot study refined concepts with anyone who lacks self-respect by eating in public or acting in such a manner. And one cannot expect someone who has the habit of behaving in a low manner to achieve spiritual greatness. Just these couple of lines are what we're going to focus on tonight because they're so critical. So first and foremost, we understand here from the Chazon Ish that when a person accustoms themselves, makes themselves used to behaving in a low-life manner, this darkens their soul. This darkens their spiritual light that was gifted to them by God. So much so that they can become accustomed to it, used to it, and really get to a point where they believe it's the right behavior. The Gemara in Masechet Kiddushin says that a person that makes a sin the first time and doesn't see himself get punished will do it again. If he does it again and he doesn't get punished again, he turns what he did that was sinful into something permitted. This is the Gemara in Masechet Kiddushin, page 40a. So here we see that the nature of a person is to do whatever it is that they want, whatever they desire. He'll take something that doesn't belong to him. He'll touch something that he's not allowed to touch. She'll look at something she's not allowed to look at. Whatever it is, that's a sinful behavior. Usually, they're going to just try to see what happens. They're not going to go all out and really do everything that they want, but they're going to just try. They're going to just touch something just to see what happens. How do the authorities, the police react? How do the parents react? How does their wife or boss react? You know, they took something. Let's say, for example, there is what's called petty cash. This was more common in the old days where we used to be actually cash. Today, it's usually a credit card, where there's like a company credit card that the boss gives to the employees, and he tells them, listen, if there are company expenses, things that you need to buy for the business, for the company, for the benefit of the company, use the company card. And he has, or she has, the trust in the employees that they're only going to buy things that are relevant to the business. They're not going to buy their groceries with it, or they're going to buy themselves jewelry with it. They're going to buy, things for themselves. Now, a lowlife is going to do exactly the opposite. He may buy, things for the business. Let's say, for example, if the business needs some pens or some paper, or he has to take out a client to a dinner or a lunch, he'll do that. But then he'll say, you know what? Who's really paying attention to what I'm spending the money on? This company has so much money. Let me buy myself tickets to a game, and let me buy myself also a new watch. And let me buy myself some sneakers. And he starts, buying small things. Just a few $100s, and he figures no one's going to pay attention. Now, if he sees no one pays attention, a month has passed and no one has said anything, what is he going to do? Next time he has this desire, he's going to buy something bigger. He's going to buy a more expensive watch. He's going to buy, instead of tickets to a game, he's going to buy a vacation. He's going to buy something more expensive. Why? Because his low-life mentality has given them the permission that since they're, number one, not paying attention to what I'm spending the money on, two, I deserve it for whatever irrational reason he thinks, and three, nothing happened after I did it the first time. Nothing happened. There's really no punishment. And even if they punish me, they say, oh, you shouldn't do it, I'll pretend like it's a mistake and I'll pay it back, and they rationalize the things. And this type of low-life behavior is very, very common in corporate America, in corporations around the world, and unfortunately in society altogether. People test the system and they take and take and take until it's too late. This is even more common when people get grants from governments. There's no shortage of horrible, Chilul Hashem stories, even from the Jewish community, where there were certain schools or different types of Jewish institutions that received government funding in order for them to use that funding, that money, to educate the kids, to build a school, to do things that are, in essence, that the funding is made up for. But instead of the money being used to help the kids, to build a school, to increase the education, a few criminal lowlives actually fit the definition in all of its capacity and started using that money for their own personal investment portfolios and vacations. And eventually this Chilul Hashem that was silent became a Chilul Hashem that went into the news and people ended up being in jail. And there's literally no shortage of these stories. There was even a lowlife that was part of a terrorism attack just a few years ago, where the shooter shot, and he was one of the people that got injured. And initially this guy looked like a hero, that he survived and he spoke out, and it looked like he was a really, really nice guy. And quickly did Hashem make sure that, let me bring him to the top, just like Haman, and then destroy him for all the low-life behavior that he's had over the period of years for stealing money. And that's exactly what happened. After he hit the top and got a lot of publicity, then Hashem brought out all of the real news behind the scenes that's happening against this guy, and he was exposed as a person that did a lot of wrong things with other people's money. So this type of behavior, unfortunately, is common, and it's not just in the secular world, it's not just in the non-Jewish world. Unfortunately, it's in the Jewish world. And the reason why we mention specifically the Jewish world is just like any other lecture. These are our brothers and sisters. We have to acknowledge the fact that we're doing something wrong in order to fix it, and not be oblivious of the fact that there's some bad things in our own backyard. We have to face the problems in order for them to go away. They're not going to just go away by themselves.